Hello there, and a warm welcome to You and Your Business, with me, Alec Drew, standing in for Don Harris. Each week we have the pleasure of talking with interesting and inspiring people about what they do, both in business and in life. This week it's all about, I suppose, one of the most talked about and one of the most important parts of the business, sales. The email address for the show is yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie, and if you'd like to talk to Don someday about what you do, just send him an email telling him a little bit about you and your business. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Turley. Hiya, Peter. And Peter is a sales speaker and trainer specialising in making salespeople, business owners, outstanding and memorable. Fantastic. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go straight into this with you, Peter, because sales are just one of these things. Three things. What makes a good salesperson? I mean, we're always hearing about, he's a great salesperson, she's a great salesperson. What makes a great salesperson?
I suppose, in my opinion, it's not everybody's opinion, but my opinion of what makes a great salesperson is somebody who can actually take the time to listen to what their customer requires, to understand what the customer really wants and really needs, and tailor a solution, tailor a package, tailor a product, whatever it happens to be, that actually meets the customer's requirements.
Well, I wish we met more of those, because it's amazing. You find people pushing things at you. You go into shops or wherever it is, you see people trying to push things at you, and it's quite clear they're not listening to you. I suppose, I know one area of a speciality for you is in the motor industry.
Yes.
So I'm sure you have a couple of anecdotes from us about that.
Well, we wouldn't want to single any people out, but, you know, never mind the motor industry, but in any industry, think about the amount of people that you've met when you're looking for whatever it happens to be, a new laptop or whatever, and instead of them trying to find out what matters to you, they just pick up the nearest product and say, this is what it is, this is what it does, do you want it? And what do we end up saying? Well, think about it, or how much is it? And we make decisions based on price rather than whether the product or service actually matters to us.
Right. In terms of price, it is one of those things, and it's funny, I know from my own business experience, it's usually one of the first questions without people actually understanding what the offering is.
Exactly.
So talk about how you might counter that. I mean, business people listening here today will be well familiar with how much is it, and they don't even know what the offering is.
Well, this is it, and you know, it's really important to think about this. 90% of the time that people make a decision when they're picking a product, picking a service, be it for business or personal use, they might get 3 or 4, maybe 5 quotations. And what do? At the end of it, they cannot remember who was who. They lay the prices down on the table or the desk in front of them. They cannot remember who was doing what or which one matters to them. So what's the old habit? And I'm sure you've done this yourself, Alec. You either do the habitual thing, which is pick the cheapest, or pick the one in the middle, the one that we feel is the safe option. We've all been there, haven't we?
I like the way you drag me into that and tar me with the same brush. Although, strangely enough, I must say from my own experience, I've never found anybody admitting to wearing a cheap suit or you know, a cheap outfit or a cheap handbag. Inexpensive is a good word, but...
Yes, this is it. But what I'm trying to get across is that if we can communicate, understand what matters to our customer, tailor a package or a solution to suit that, and then communicate it in a way that the customer understands what it is that they're getting out of it, then the old habit of picking the cheapest or picking the one in the middle might change.
I think so. I think it's very important too. A lot of people who are buying products, and particularly if we take something like in the IT sector,
Yes.
Don't fully understand what is on offer or what the benefits are. But again, from experience, I've seen salespeople are very poor at sort of saying what the real advantage to you is. And I know you tell a very interesting story around some poor unfortunate who found himself sleeping on the couch at home many years ago. And he wouldn't be the only one, I'd say.
Yes, that's a thing that I encourage salespeople to try and find with their customers. It's called a prime buying motive.
Right.
Okay. It's the one thing that if we can find it in our customers, it's the thing that will make them decide whether to do business or not do business with us in a much quicker amount of time. And that has the benefit to us as business owners of maybe not having to give so much discount, maybe being able to justify our prices a little bit better. You see, when somebody decides they want a product or service or to change supplier or whatever it happens to be, there's always something deep down inside, deep in their emotions, that's usually the last thing you will ever imagine that it is. And we're all individuals. Every customer we ever have, every prospect we ever have, every client we ever have is a human being.
Yes, of course, we tend to forget that.
And we do tend to forget that. And all human beings are individuals, and they all have their individual backstories, their individual experiences. That if we can tap into that, it makes a big difference. Now, you mentioned that sofa story, and that goes back quite a while.
Is he still on it?
Sorry?
Is he still on it?
Not under my watch, he isn't.
Good stuff.
But it was basically a situation where I was dealing with a customer, and he was in the manufacturing area, and he was a supply chain manager, and the particular previous supplier had let him down again and again and again.
Right.
Of course, he got into a lot of trouble with the people higher up in the upstairs offices,
as you do, yeah.
where it was all made out to be his fault. Now, by discussing this with him, I discovered in the conversation that this led to arguments outside of work and problems at home because of the stress that was coming home with him. And he told me a story about how one night his wife made him sleep on the sofa because of the humour he'd come home from work in. Now, most of us would turn up and talk about the product, wouldn't we? We'd say, this is what it is and this is what it does.
Yes.
Whereas I turned around and I basically said, Liam, if you use me instead of your current supplier that's constantly letting you down, I will make sure on my watch, no matter what I have to do, I'll make sure you never have to sleep on the sofa again.
And that resonated with him.
And of course it did. It resonated much deeper than somebody coming in and talking about this is what it is. And with the result, it only took him about a third of a second to make the decision that I was the one he wanted to deal with.
And it's quite interesting, you've identified there something, finding that touch point, that pain point for somebody, and then suddenly price kind of moves down the pecking order in terms of decision making.
Of course it is. Of course it does. I mean, in that particular situation, I didn't even have to do a product demonstration.
Yeah.
I didn't, and price never came into it. Whereas if I'd come in, not found out about his, as I call it, sofa moment, and we just did the standard, this is what it is and this is what it does, where do you think it was going to end up?
Yes.
In a talk about price.
Yes.
So yeah, this is what I believe. If we can find people's prime buying motive, find what really matters to them, we can actually change the outcomes.
I suppose in terms of me meeting people on a regular basis, as I think you'll probably identify as well, everybody's favourite subject is themselves. So
yes.
So I suppose what we have to do is give them the space to let them talk about themselves and hopefully elicit that information out of them.
Yes, absolutely. And that is something, again, as we say, we tend to forget. And you're dead right. Everybody's favourite subject is themselves. And the one thing that everybody likes talking about is themselves. But how seldom do we give them the chance to talk about themselves? We can't wait to rush in and tell them what it is.
So I'm really talking to Peter Turley, the therapist here, the sales therapist.
That's an interesting moniker. I must use that, Alec.
I must check my copyright on that one. Let's see. Price won't be the consideration on that.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. So why do salespeople, though, when all this information is out there, and I mean you're training people and you're in companies and talking, why do they keep falling back to the default of trying to sell the product as opposed to the benefits of the product and how it can help? What's in people's minds from the sales side of it?
It's habits, Alec. It's right back down to habits. Somebody told them 20 years ago, this is how you sell a product. And that has been passed down, salesperson after salesperson or business owner after business owner. And this is what they do, and they've always done it, so they continue to always do it. So my whole thing is maybe take a step back. Let's take a look at this from the big picture point of view and think about how could we do it a little bit different? How could we do it in a way that makes us memorable?
You always find, though, I mean, particularly in an organisation where there's quite a number of salespeople, that salespeople are generally more under the microscope because they have to perform, they have to have the figures and the targets out there. But
Yes.
they seem to sometimes escape under that and get away with it. And have you seen that, and how did they get away with that? Or why are they not spotted for so long?
Why are they not spotted for so long? Because I suppose they're just about getting away with their numbers every month.
Right.
They may not be making a huge amount of profit,
Yes.
but they're getting their numbers in. I saw a very interesting survey recently at a, what would you call it, a Sales Institute presentation.
All right.
And one of the things that was brought up was that many salespeople only achieve a bulk of their targets in the last 4 to 5 working days of the month.
All right.
Okay, when they're really under pressure. And of course, what does that lead to? They're under pressure, they're panicking, they need to get their numbers up. So what do? They throw huge discounts
Right.
at the product or service that they're presenting to try and get the customer to buy it today so that they can, achieve their results. And one of the things is, as long as people get their numbers,
Right.
sometimes the actual profitability is not taken under the microscope.
Right.
So the way I'd like people to look at it is, what if we had the methodologies and the processes so that we could maybe achieve our target with a few days to go in the month? So we weren't put under that pressure, so that we didn't have to give the discounts. What difference would that make to our bottom lines? And you as well as anybody, you talk to people about their bottom lines. And the bottom line is what matters in the end of the day.
Yes, it's amazing in terms of, in various sectors, well, in nearly all sectors you see it, that these things are often forgotten about. I suppose in one sense what you're saying, if you were to take it to a conclusion, and the best time to buy anything is the last day of the last quarter of the year, where everybody's under pressure to close off a deal.
Of course. From a buyer's perspective, that can be a very good time. But if you're not always a buyer and you're running a business,
Yes.
and you have salespeople or sales teams out there representing your business, that's the last time you want them selling.
Yes, of course. And I suppose from a sanity point of view as well, from a salesperson's sanity point of view, it makes sense to have your targets achieved by the end of a month or quarter, whatever it is.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, I was talking to somebody who was in one of the large industries, and they had people in training their procurement people to beat up on salespeople. Have you come across that?
I have, absolutely. And they're trained to take the emotion out of it. It's part of procurement that they do that. But again, and the reason they get away with it and the reason that it works so well for them is because people aren't identifying with them as human beings.
Right.
They're all working on the numbers game, and it all becomes about the discount.
Right. I know we've seen experience of this in Japan with the just-in-time, where that sort of seemed a great idea at the time initially, and then failed because people were being beaten up in price. So people seem to be moving more towards a collaborative type affair, or open book
Yes,
policy.
of course. You see, one of the things we have to remember is 20% of our customers make us 80% of our annual profit.
The old 80-20 rule, eh?
The old 80-20 rule. And if we took a step back and looked at that, the 80% of the people we deal with on a daily basis that only make us 20% of our profit, and they're killing us.
Yes.
And they're the ones that beat us up on price. If you think about it from any kind of business point of view, when somebody comes in who's been buying stuff from you throughout the year, and they come in the week before Christmas and they put a bottle of wine or a bottle of whiskey or a Christmas cake or whatever on
Are
your
you allowed to
desk.
still do that with anybody anymore? We're getting very politically correct these days.
Well, this is it. But the point I'm making is the people who are the happiest with us, the people who love doing business with us, are often the ones we make money from.
Yes.
The people that we bend over backwards to try and look after, make very little money on, are always the ones that are, well, I won't say always the ones, but they're the ones that don't bring us in a present at the end of the year.
No, they don't, do they? Well, they never bring you anything but grief.
And it makes you wonder at the end of the year, why did you do it?
It's an interesting exercise. I remember doing it many years ago myself, and I'm sure you're advising your own people. I actually looked at those people and did an analysis over 3 months and picked out 6 of them and said, hang on a second, do I really need them? So I went out and I met up with them and I said, okay, guys and girls, whoever you are, we're putting up our prices by 60%. Now, there was shock horror.
Of course there was.
2 of them left.
Yes.
4 stayed. And we suddenly realised, great to see the 2 go, because they were just nothing but grief. And they're always the people, they want it yesterday, they want it for nothing, and cause ructions within the business.
Yeah.
But the 4 stayed. Really, what happened was the dynamics changed in the business in the sense that we now knew who needed the other most.
Yes.
So there was a bonus, and there's a tip for people, I'd say, out there. Have a look at those people and decide, really, do you need them?
Yes, and it's really important. The other thing that's very interesting is those people who do love what we do, who go out of their way to say thank you, they're also the ones that bring us new customers, aren't they?
Yes, talk about that, because this is a very important part of selling that I think a lot of novices in the area don't fully understand, the importance of referrals. Talk about that for a minute, if you don't mind.
Well, referrals are incredibly important. You see, when you think about it, we go out, we do social media marketing, we do all kinds of things to try and attract inbound leads.
Yes.
But then they're really at the very start of the journey. And it can very often become about price. The first thing they want to know is how much is it and all that kind of stuff, right? But think about this for a second. When you have a really, really good customer that loves what you do, and they arrive knocking on your door one day with a pal of theirs or a colleague or somebody in a similar industry, and they go, meet my friend Joe. Joe needs you to do the same thing you do for me.
Right.
How much easier is it to make Joe a customer?
Yes, and then price, of course, is not the issue.
And then price doesn't become the issue because the person who brought them in the first place has told them so much about you that the trust is already there. Half the sales process has already been done by your happy customer.
Which makes sense.
Which makes a huge amount of sense.
I get the feeling that so many business owners out there have so many Joes in their life, but never ask the $64,000 question.
Yes, that's really important. We need to ask questions. We need to ask our customers, who else do you know that's in a business similar to yours that could benefit from what I brought to you?
And strangely enough, there seems to be a sense of people don't ask it because of fear of rejection. When, in fact, if you're doing the job you're talking about, they should be only too happy to recommend you.
Of course. And it's a thing that's very important. The fear of rejection is something that comes up an awful lot. Sometimes even when we're dealing with people we've already dealt with, we don't ask for the business. We actually will go down the route of presenting something, making a presentation, doing a good job of that, but then forget at the end to actually ask because we're afraid of a no.
Right.
And it's exactly the same with referrals. We're afraid of them. But if the customer is that happy with us, if they've written you an endorsement
yes,
or whatever it happens to be, of course they're going to recommend you to others. They just mightn't think of it. So if we remind them, you never know what's going to happen.
You're dead right. You've got me on a hobby horse here of one of mine. I was just thinking of something which I think is very important in business. I'd like to send this out as a message. I'm going to take my opportunity now.
Okay.
I know I'm conducting the interview, but I'd just love to use this as an opportunity. I'd say to people in business, if you get a quotation from somebody in relation to a product or a service that you're interested in, and for some reason you decide not to use it, A, for price, B, it's fallen off the agenda, or you're going to defer to it,
yes,
tell them. Don't have them chasing you continually, and and you're dodging them, and they're trying to get to you.
Yes,
do the decent, and tell them, put them out of their misery early in the process.
Absolutely, that's very important. And you're dead right. Too many people run away. And that's another thing. We're afraid to say, as customers, we're afraid to say no to people as well. So it is, and it's very important that we're honest.
I think that would help.
Honesty out there is very, very important, but in very short supply. And, it's one of the things. Unfortunately, when we go out to sell our products and services, one of the biggest things we're fighting against is the stereotype
Right.
of the salesperson.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there are people listening out there right now who, the moment you mentioned earlier we were going to start talking about sales, a shiver went up their spine, through no fault of our own or through no fault of their own. And it's one of the things a lot of people don't like to do, don't like to go out, because we are fighting the stereotype. But we need to start thinking about, where did the stereotype come from in the first place?
Go on, tell me. Tell me.
Well, I have a theory on it.
Okay.
Because everybody says, when I ask that to rooms of business owners, the first thing they say is, oh, we've all had so many bad experiences. But then I ask them to count up the amount of experiences.
Yeah.
And they can never count more than 4 or 5. And that's over numbers of years.
Really? Yeah.
One of the things that's out there is the television is telling us, and has been telling us for donkey's years, that you can't trust people in sales. Can you give me, when you think about it yourself, you probably go, oh, no, it doesn't do that. But let's think about it for a second. One of the biggest watched television shows in history was Only Fools and Horses.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And what does that tell you about someone who works in sales?
Yes.
You can't trust them.
You didn't put that in your CV when you were coming in, Peter.
But it's a monkey on our back that we have to go out and fight with all the time. So if we can build the trust in our customers, and that they can trust us not just to be honest, but to deliver a product or service that's actually going to benefit them, then their attitude to us as salespeople will start to change.
Fantastic. I'm conscious of the time that we have a few minutes left, and I'd like to grab just a couple of pieces for our listeners,
Yes.
Business people out there. From your own experience, how do you know when a customer is kicking that decision down the road that that's a dead decision? They're not going to be with you. How many times will you go back to them to find out? So you put in a proposal, we'll call it for computers or whatever it is.
Yes.
It's now September. They said they needed them. They said that they'll make a decision by the end of September.
Yes.
We're now into the end of October. Are you still chasing them?
Are you still chasing them? Now, that's a fantastic question, actually. I'm going to tell you a little statistic that might freak you out a little bit.
Right.
Did you know that worldwide only 20% of salespeople follow up?
Wow.
Think about the last time you went out to buy a laptop or a car or whatever it happened to be, and they said they'd come back to you with a price or whatever. How often did they actually ring you back?
Yeah, it's true. It's true, yeah.
So think about that. 20% means 1 in 5. So anybody out there, if you follow up even once, chances are you're the only one.
All right. And how many times would you think would be an appropriate amount to follow up? Like you don't want to be 30 times in the last 6 months of the year.
No, you don't want to be 30 times because that's almost harassment, isn't it? But I think if you follow up 3 or 4 times, don't be afraid to follow up 3 or 4 times.
Right.
I have actually dealt with somebody who told me that they got the business with somebody on the 13th phone call.
Right.
Now, I think that's a little bit extreme, but you just don't know. As I said, everybody's an individual. When you call them up, you don't know what's happening in their life. You don't know what's going on. They tell you it's a bad time, and it could very well be a bad time. They've a sick child or whatever it happens to be. So don't be put off by it. Don't be disheartened by it. And keep it going.
Pick the days in the week and the times in those days. Don't ring people to follow up and stuff. When's a bad time to do that?
A really bad time to do it is Friday afternoon.
Oh, really?
In my opinion.
I would have thought most people would be in good form. You might get an answer out of them.
Well, you see, you don't know what deadline they didn't meet that week.
All
you
right.
don't know what they need to have done by 6 o'clock on the Friday so that they can go home happy.
Right.
So, personally, I think a Monday morning and a Tuesday morning are really good times to follow up with people.
Wow.
Because they haven't got all the pressure of the week piled on top of them at the end.
Right. There you go. You see, you don't know. That's why we get experts into the studio to tell us all of these things. Because a lot of people are very reluctant sellers, but find themselves in sales and have to do that.
Yes.
And it's all these little tips that when put together, help you to achieve what you're trying to achieve.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. None of us know it all, Alec.
Well, I know that. I hardly know anything myself. But that's why we do these shows and get experts in, and we hope that the business audience listening will, start putting into practice some of the things that they hear that'll make a difference.
Exactly. And if we can put those into practice, they do make a difference.
I suppose with just a minute or two left, what would be just one final 30-seconder that you can say that here's a piece of advice I think you should use?
Let's give the listeners a 4-word sales course.
Yes.
How about that?
Great. Sounds great.
The most concise sales course I've ever given people is ask questions and pay attention. You never know what you're going to pick up. I would never have found out that sofas moment if I hadn't asked the questions and listened.
Well, I think that's a fantastic piece of advice, and I suppose then that dovetails into what we talked about. Everybody's favourite subject is themselves.
Is themselves, exactly.
Yeah, so there you go, folks. That's what you have to avoid, talking about yourselves, because you're the only one really that interested in it. Everybody else has a bit more going on in their lives. So, Peter, where can they get in contact with you?
Oh, anybody that's interested in talking to me about how we can help them, salestalk.ie is the website, and my email address is peter@salestalk.ie.
Well, that sounds all very easy to remember, and I think with that we're going to be finishing off and saying goodbye, but I've certainly taken a huge amount from where we're going, and what I'd like to say is that's all we've got time for here today. A special thanks to Peter Turley for coming in to You and Your Business studio, and also
welcome.
And also thanks to Darren on sound. You can contact the show by emailing yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie, and perhaps we could be talking about your business someday soon. The podcast of the show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. I'm Alec Drew, standing in for Don Harris. Join him again next week at the same time, 12:30, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.